Civil discourse and communication in this country sure as hell seems like it's lost. It seems like we can't talk to one another anymore. It seems like the tough conversations don't happen. They're going to happen here. Welcome to the Back Porch, where we're going to have honest, respectful, civil discourse with prominent individuals at a national and local level, friends, colleagues, and clients. We're going to talk about the tough topics, and we're going to put them out there for you to listen to. We hope you enjoy. Welcome to the Back Porch. Hello and welcome to the Back Porch. So thanks for tuning in. And today we're going to have a man who is a very special guest, but also is a friend that I'm happy to call a friend for several years now at this point. And he's agreed to come on the show today because there's probably nothing more pressing for America overseas than Ukraine and what is going to happen now that Trump has been elected. What is going to happen? What changes are coming? And I thought it was a good opportunity to also talk about the reality of what's going on over there with somebody who I would venture to guess has no equal as far as an individual who is more capable of discussing what's really happening over there and giving us some insight into the realities of what the war looks like, how it affects the Ukrainian people, and what America's role has been there than my dear friend, Dan Rice. And before I bring Dan in, I'm going to try and read some of these glowing realities of who he is. It's one of these things where he's been a friend, but until I was preparing for today's show, I had no idea what a cool friend I really had. So Dan is the special advisor to the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, a West Point grad, a partner at the Thayer Leadership Group, which takes care of leadership conferences for CEOs at West Point. He's also got more degrees than I would care to probably have to mention, but aside from West Point, he's got an MBA from Kellogg, a couple of additional degrees from Northwestern, and a master's from Penn. And he is also the president of American University out in Kyiv in Ukraine. And so I don't have any further information that I can tell you that would be better than what we're going to talk about with Dan. So let's bring Dan Rice on. And my buddy, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving us some time. And you're in New York, which is cool. So we're on the same time zone.
Yes, great to see you, Alex. Thanks for having me. And I have to send this video on to my mom after your glowing introduction. So
oh man, I'll send it. Yeah, I'll send it for you. Yeah, yes. Listen, I'm a good wingman, so I can actually. It's perfect because I can actually say that all day long because you make me sound cool because I have a friend like you. So I do want to start now that I've said all these great things you're going to tell your mom about. I do want to start for today with something. I've already told you this. You know I was going to show it. I want to bring this up in front of the camera because this is the coolest present that I have ever received from anybody that I am not related to. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I love it. The fact that my own wife, when I brought it home and told her the story after I made you text it to me so I would never get it wrong. I want to thank you for this, but could you do me a favor, Dan? Again, welcome, brother, but can you do me a favor? And for anybody who's watching this, let them know what it is that you gave me as a present. So cool, man.
That is an artillery shell. It's made, U.S. made. It's a 105 millimeter artillery shell that was provided to the Ukrainian Armed Forces and fired out of a U.S. made howitzer. And the symbolism on it that was carved into it is in the middle. It is the national symbol of Ukraine, the trident. And so that is really, it's a 1,000-year-old symbol. It's got a sailboat in the middle and an anchor around it, signifying their Nordic heritage. And then on the top and bottom is called the Shivanka. That is the embroidery of Ukraine, historic embroidery of Ukraine. So that shell symbolizes basically the transition from war to peace and swords to plowshares, which is kind of biblical. So taking a piece of war and making it into art, and that's symbolic of what we are doing in Ukraine. Hopefully, the great glory and future of Ukraine.
Man, when I took that home, I was like, where is my wife going to let me put this that is not in the garage or in my home office? And she loved it so much, she's carving out a special location for it. So when you come to Miami, you have to come to the house. I have to show it to you.
Great.
So listen, man, I thought, nothing more pressing. I think maybe we could start by going backwards because you and I have been talking about finding some time You traveled a bunch, so the time zones, et cetera. I finally got you on the East Coast. And but I thought, given what's happened in the last couple of days, I would love to start with just asking you this one question, right? So we've all heard about this escalation, to use that word, that has now occurred as a result of the Biden administration coming in at post-election, right? Trump gets elected. Biden seems to have, quote, escalated the realities of what is going on over there. At least that's the news we're getting over here with respect to now the allowance of these long-range missiles that we have provided to Ukraine. I know you're play a big role in those. Talk to us a little bit about that role that you have with respect to that, because I believe from what I saw in your news piece last night, you were the behind the scenes advocate for those missiles to make their way over there.
Yeah.
And now that this new administrative function from the Biden administration to essentially allow Ukraine to use these long range missiles to get into Russian territory with a direct mandate from Putin that I saw this morning included him changing their nuclear plan.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that and give us some education? Because, man, over here, we don't know what to believe in the news, but we're definitely going to believe you.
Sure. It's a very complex subject, and a lot of it's just misinformation. That's why I like being able to speak about it here. So I was very instrumental in getting those weapons. I was the special advisor to the commander in chief from May 2022 through March 2023. I stepped down from that position when I took the role as the president of the American University of Kyiv. But I was going back and forth between Kyiv and Wiesbaden, Germany, where our U.S. headquarters is based, and Washington, D.C. I've made 23 trips since the war started. And so it is a lot of travel. It's not easy to get to Ukraine. So I fly through Poland and then drive in. It's usually about a 3 or 4 day trip. And it gives me a lot of time to think about the war and about these issues. So in order to be able to speak more articulately. So these weapons, basically, what this war has become a war of words, a war of what we call in the business information operations. And so the Russians have unfortunately done a really good job of creating misinformation and creating the terminology of this war. So just imagine an aggressor is attacking the United States and they're coming in from the north or south, pick your poison, but they're invading and they're firing weapons across the United States that are 1,500 kilometer range, maybe basically 1,000-mile range. And then you're firing back at them with 10-mile range or 20-mile range. And people are saying we're escalating. That's the insanity of this discussion. The U.S. is not escalating. NATO is not escalating. Ukraine is not escalating. This weekend, Russia attacked Ukraine. Just imagine the biggest and best bombers. So these are coming from all over Russia, Tupolev bombers, and they're strategic bombers that were intended to bomb the United States with nuclear weapons. So they're flying out of all distant airfields, thousands of kilometers away from Ukraine, and they're dropping cruise missiles out of there, and they have a 1,500 kilometer range, and they're firing them into Ukraine, into the major cities, into the civilian populations, intentionally attacking children's hospitals, for instance. How do you stop these? You need weapons to go after these, and we're only giving them to. Yet yesterday's announcement only gave Ukraine a 300 kilometer range ATACMS, and an ATACMS is a missile that basically either has a single projectile, meaning it has one big boom, or it has submunitions which explode over the target and smaller munitions fall, and it's very effective against troops and armor. The second one, the first one's really good about attacking like a fixed position, like a big bunker, command headquarters, and they're extremely accurate. Our weapons are extremely accurate. Usually within 1 meter, they hit their target at a range of 300 kilometers. So they're very effective weapons. I've been asking for these for years now. I hate to even think that it's been years, but I advised General Zaluzhny on August 11th. I flew over, gave him a presentation on August 11th, 2022. On August 12th, he requested these from General Milley, and I confirmed that from General Milley's staff as soon as I got the message. So I was very involved in this and helped lobby in Congress to get this, and eventually the U.S. approved it. I try not to get into the middle of politics in the U.S. I don't like people to know whether I'm a Democrat
or hard. It's hard given what you do not to end up in the middle of it somewhere, man.
It is. So I really just stick to the facts and the policies, and I try not to pick a side on Republican or Democrat. I'm proud that the U.S. finally approved these weapons, and I think it was long overdue. And we should be approving more. We should be approving Tomahawk missiles, which can reach out 1,500 kilometers to counter what the Russians are firing. But that's a separate issue.
So talk to me for a second about that reality. That thanks for all that information, right? But so we hear about the U.S., right, and that's what we're here to talk about with respect to all that we're providing to this non-NATO country out essentially for reasons that we can get into about why we're there. But can you talk a little bit about what kind of support is Ukraine receiving from other nations? Because from over here, it sure seems like we're either the only ones or the bulk of what's being provided over there. And so, what kind of participation are we really getting from other countries in what's happening in Ukraine?
Sure. Well, you mentioned one aspect. The reason we're there really is, when the Cold War ended, and it ended with, if we can all look back, it ended without a single shot being fired. I mean, we won the Cold War against the Soviets by bankrupting them, and I was in the military back then, and we were so proud. The wall came down, and all of a sudden, all these countries became free. And one of the countries that became free was Ukraine. And so Ukraine was founded as a new country in 1991. And one of the first things they did is they wanted to partner with the U.S. They wanted to come closer to the U.S. and United Kingdom. So they were holding 1,400 nuclear weapons. Can you imagine a country that's brand new with 1,400 nuclear weapons? And the U.S. under Ambassador Taylor, who's a friend of mine, went in and said, "Hey, we'd like you to give up these nuclear weapons to make the world a safer place. And in order to do that, we'll sign an agreement in 1994 called the Budapest Memorandum, in which we gave them a security guarantee." And so we said the UK, US, and Russia gave them a security guarantee. Now Russia's invading them, and the two that gave the security guarantee are obliged to support that. So that's really the root of all this. Goes back to they would have nuclear weapons, and if they had nuclear weapons, Russia could not have invaded them. So it proves in hindsight they were foolish to give up their nuclear weapons, because we did not give them support in the invasion of 2014. So
yeah, that would have been the deterrent, right? That would have been a deterrent, which Dan, isn't the provision of these long range missiles. And thanks for the math on that, right? It was a fifth of the range of what Russia is using. I think that's a really good perspective for people to understand. But
yes.
but talk a little bit about that reality of, so now we've got the war that's going on. We've got Trump coming into power here in a couple of months. We're going to talk a little bit about all these cabinet appointments, and a little bit about Hegseth too, which we put out there. But what do you expect is going to be different, right? We all heard Trump before the election talk about this thing's going to end even before I get sworn in.
Mm-hmm.
And can you talk a little bit about what you think is coming? Because you mentioned, and you said it, you're like, I can't believe I'm talking about it's been years that this war has been going on.
Yeah.
Outside looking in, that to me means there's a little bit of a war of attrition, right, to some extent. Because listen, man, I'm assuming that you have Ukrainian people who are leaving the country, who are not coming back. So we talk about the realities of war that people don't mention, which is people leave for a variety of reasons, starting with, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
And then when things end, whatever that means, whenever that happens, a large segment of those people don't come back. Right.
Yes.
So I think, so start with the Trump thing and how that you think might affect what's going to happen here over the next couple of months. And then we'll talk about those cabinet appointments.
Sure. The tragedies of this war are just so many. It's an enormous war. It's the largest war in Europe in 80 years. It's the third largest war in Europe in 150 years. So think about that. In 150 years, we had World War I, World War II, and now the war in Ukraine. That's the scale of the war. There's been over 1 million casualties on both sides. And when you had the invasion occur, you had 8.5 million women, and mostly women and children, leave the country. Some never coming back. So some of these soldiers have women and children that are their wives and kids and never coming back to the country. They've gone and settled in Germany or Ireland or the U.S., and they're just not coming back because they found a better life. So it's beyond sad. There's tragedies, and then the death and the wounding.
Right. So you have women and children, at your point, that are leaving, and then, God, unfortunately, then we have a manpower issue. I'm sure, as there's not an unlimited supply of soldiers for Ukraine that are going to meet an unfortunate fate in trying to defend their country.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of war is a math problem, and you look at Russia's got 141 million people. Ukraine had about 38 million. Now it's down to less than 30 million, and so you have a massive country invading a much smaller country, and so it's a war of attrition that the Russians are choosing, and unfortunately, the Russians are choosing to fight a war of attrition, which means they want to kill more Ukrainians than Ukraine can tolerate, and Ukraine has to kill more Russians and now North Koreans than they can tolerate. So the fact is that the killing is increasing steadily. And so Ukraine was killing or wounding about 5,000 Russians at the first 10 months per month. So 5,000 per month. Now it's over 40,000 Russians per month. So a
Wow.
massive number. So over 700,000 have been killed or wounded since the beginning of the war, mostly through artillery. Artillery is the number one killer on the battlefield by far. A lot of other stuff gets in the news about drones, which are also very effective. They're not killing the majority. So it's an artillery duel going back and forth, Russia versus Ukraine, and us supplying better and better artillery now. And that's what my role has been, to get better and better artillery and ammunition. But so as you talk about a new president coming in, and again, not to be political, to pick a side, any president coming in has a chance to reset the war, and so
Yep.
setting new conditions, and so I think it's going to be a breath of fresh air for the ability to set new conditions. What this administration chooses as the priorities will be interesting. I think they're kind of keeping some things close to the vest, saying a lot of different things, and what in the end is he going to do? He says he can solve the war within a day. There's a possibility. If you look back historically, Ronald Reagan on his first day solved the Iranian hostage crisis. They were released 20 minutes after he was elected. So there is a precedent set for ending a major international crisis. We don't know what's being discussed behind the scenes. We don't know what carrots or sticks are being used to entice or force Russia out. But I do think the new administration has a great opportunity here. I'm very pleased with the national security picks that he has had on his appointments. And you mentioned,
let's talk about that for a second, and then we'll talk about how North Korea and their addition of allegedly of troops, right? That even here the misinformation is you wake up and we're still not 100% sure that there's 10,000 North Korean troops. We just hear that there are, but talk about that, and then these cabinet appointments to whatever extent you can talk about Hegseth a little bit. That as the appointment, I'm sure you've read, as I have. I feel like every day I'm looking at a social media feed with a bunch of negative stuff about all of them. That's and that's one of the misinformation campaigns that we're trying. They're not all horrible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you really take a step back and look at overall the appointments, I think Ronald Reagan is still called the great communicator. He's a legend from his communications. Yep. I think what we're seeing now, because social media, because the 24-hour news cycle, I think what is aligning, which I think is brilliant, this is a war of words, a war of ideals around the world between Russia, China, Iran, the three state sponsors of terror, and then the Houthis, the Hezbollah, Hamas terrorists, all aligning together. And that's why you have TikTok affecting universities on campus here, the Chinese affecting people to support Hamas against Israel. And so you're having a global war, the axis of evil, and it is now again a war of words. And so our messages that need to go out on all types of platforms need to be communicated by the great communicators. And I've just realized it, and we can trademark this now, but I think he's creating the team of great communicators. This is what this new cabinet is. So if you look at all of the assignments, they're all individually great communicators. So you look at many of them are Fox News commentators. So people are laughing at it that they're commentators. But most of them, like Duffy was announced yesterday, transportation. He was a congressman before that. So, Pete Hegseth.
Well, Fox News is Trump's favorite channel, right? It's like if it was me, we would just have a bunch of like ESPN anchors.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that would work for if we were fighting Canada, but but if you really look at it and take a step back, I mean, you've got Huckabee. He was governor, and now he's ambassador to Israel. But he's also a great communicator. He's been on TV for a long time. He's wrestled with these issues, just like Ronald Reagan took his tour with GE, and he honed his craft. He started in radio, then he went to the silver screen, then he went to the GE tour, and he was speaking all the time, discussing, having. Pete Hegseth was on TV all the time. Now, if you look at 28 SecDefs that we've had, Secretary of Defense that we've had in history, only 3 of them were 4-star generals. Mattis, currently Lloyd Austin, and then originally the second one, which was George Marshall. But most of our SecDefs had junior military time. They got out, they did something in the civilian world, and then they came back. And that's actually very healthy, I think. Because
what a great perspective. I'm so glad. I'm going to interrupt you there for a second, because that's something in my prep and my love of politics and reading everything, I didn't know how, right, you just did a wonderful perspective over the reality of what is the biggest knock on Hegseth, which everybody just stops at. He's a Fox anchor, right? Yeah. Not he's a great communicator, not this is normal. right? 25 out of 28 secretaries of defense have not had 4-star generals at
Yes.
the helm.
If you compare him to the other 25, 3 of which had zero military experience. So 3 of them didn't even have any military experience. And then of the 22 that did, Pete has probably a better record than all of them. And so Pete has infantry time in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So when he's speaking to the 4 stars and 3 stars and the 2 stars that he's now going to be commanding, he understands a lot of their crucible of combat time. And so he actually, I think he is going to do. I was initially shocked. I know Pete; he's a friend. I was initially shocked when I heard that appointment. I couldn't believe it. And the more I've thought about it, and Mike Waltz, I know Mike too. I think Mike was special forces officer, first special forces officer to become a congressman, and another Floridian, and like us, and so you've got a group of Floridians between Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz and President Trump, and they are all great communicators. And if you look at each of these, I mean, you look at Kristi Noem, she's a fantastic communicator. I think President Trump is picking exactly where I think the belly button of this war, this global war, is all about communication now. And I think he's picking a team of great communicators. And so that's the one trend that you see in all of these. And I think it's brilliant. If it's accidental or if it's just coincidence, but I do think it's brilliant. And I think the great communicators is what we need. Forget about Republicans, forget about Democrats. It's what the United States needs now to take this path into the future. And so I'm really encouraged by these. I think the Mike Waltz national security position, the Pete Hegseth position, the Marco Rubio, I think these are all, the CIA director, has an intelligence background, Radcliffe. I think they're very strong. I think they're very strong for Ukraine. What it means for Ukraine, let's get back to Ukraine. I think what we're seeing is an opportunity for Trump to come in strong. I think everybody thinks he's a Putin puppet. I don't believe that. I think he's going to come in strong.
Yeah, I never have either, Dan. Right? I mean, it's the again, the misinformation, the narratives that we all get, and et cetera. And we had for the 4 years that people forget he was already president. The 4 years he was president, we didn't have anything that was Putin puppet related, other than conspiracy theories and stuff that were never proven, right? So now he's getting another chance. And I actually love the fact that he's coming in and as a bit of a lame duck, in the sense that he's setting timetables for 2.5 years from when he gets elected, that he wants by the 250th anniversary of this country in 2026, that he wants to have a bunch of stuff done before that midterm election that year. So I think, to your point, right, he's not a Putin puppet. He's going to come in, a little bit of a wild card to many as to what's going to happen. But to echo your point, that you think that this is actually a great time to see what these great communicators are going to be able to do. And as to Ukraine, where it's basically your home. By the way, don't think that I didn't catch you referring to yourself as a Floridian already. Okay. So, but yeah, as it impacts Ukraine, Dan, let me let you continue there on that.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is great. I mean, I would love for him to come in and say, look, we're going back to 1991 borders, and we are going to. So what he just bought from a negotiating standpoint is time. He has 4 years. President Trump has 4 years. Putin knows he has to deal with him 4 more years. Putin's 72 years old, and his legacy is Ukraine. Now, if President Trump comes in hard, he can do things economically, and that's how we won against the Soviet Union. It was economic. Yep. It's the economy, stupid, And so if we and that was what Bill Clinton won his election on, the economy. It's all boils down to economics. And President Trump can come in hard against Putin and say, we're going to continue this war, we're going to continue to support Ukraine, and we're going to come in with all these new economic hurdles that are going to hurt Russia and eventually make it collapse. Or you withdraw to 91 borders, we withdraw all of these economic sanctions, we let you get back to being a gas station masquerading as a country instead of a terrorist organization masquerading as a gas station masquerading as a country. So, but I do think that there's a chance to reset, a level set. President Trump comes in hard. I think he can do it. I think he can do just what Reagan did, get the hostages released. I want President Trump to come in hard and win this war and go to peace. And everybody wants peace, but not at any cost.
That's so true, man, and not at any cost. And as we get ready here in a couple of minutes to wrap up, I want to address your role as the president of American University out in Kyiv. I can't imagine when you first took that role. I remember we were talking about it, and I remember thinking, I think Dan might be the only person that I know that is running to a job in a war-torn country to become the president of a university in Kyiv. and you took the job, you went out there. We obviously just heard about all the other stuff that you're doing, but talk to us about that role. What is it like to be the president of a large university like American University in the capital of Ukraine during these war-torn times where you've got probably less students, I would imagine, to some extent than when you started. And what's that been like?
It's been quite an experience, to say the least, but very proud to be the president of American University Kyiv. And it was originally a startup that launched in February of 2022, 3 weeks before the invasion. So Ambassador Kurt Volker is one of the founders, and the brainchild is a Ukrainian named Alexei Shersnov, and came up with the idea of starting the American University, partnered with Arizona State University through Sintana, which is the international arm, and started the university. And they had the choice in the first couple of weeks of the war to say, hey, well, let's just shut this down and wait until the end of the war. And they said, no, let's go forward and let's launch this university. So during the first year, it was only an online university because the invasion was going on. There were blackouts.
Sure.
So the faculty launched bachelor's and master's in both IT and business. And I had 100 students. When I was asked to come lead the university as president in the fall of 2022, because I was in the news a lot, they came and reached out to me, and I have an educational background in my company. Thayer Leadership is an educational company, and we're one of the best leadership development programs in the world. We teach J.P. Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Mercedes-Benz, 7-Eleven. We've had Blackstone. We've had some great international clients. And so I have an educational background. I came in and I just love the university. It's an amazing group of young students, and our faculty is really committed and excited. And I think it'll be a long-term, it'll be a major institution within Kyiv. We're in the best building in Kyiv, right along the river. It's the old Riverport building. It was the crown jewel of the Soviet Union. It was built, and it was christened by Khrushchev, and it's in the shape of a ship because it's right on the river. And now it's commanded by a West Point grad with the U.S. flag flying high above it. And I know Khrushchev's rolling in his grave right now.
For sure.
So yeah, and so by the way, it's shaped like a ship commanded by a West Point grad. So beat Navy. We have the Army-Navy game coming up. So I like to mention that to my Navy friends.
Yeah.
So,
by the way, are you by any chance gonna be there? Because I just got an invite last night to go to that game for the first time in my life. And I said I could not stop jumping up and down saying yes before it was done. And since it's going to occur after a presidential election where Trump's coming in, where I'm going to make up this percentage, okay? But I would imagine that probably north of 90% of our country's military is Republican and or very happy that Trump is our president. When he walks into that game, the fact that I'm going to be there for that as my first Army-Navy game, my friend, is a spectacle I can't wait to enjoy.
It will be amazing. But to add to that point, so no, I think our military is really split down the middle. A friend of mine wrote a book about it politically, and it turns out that almost all officers, the officer corps I'm looking at, end up being on the political party of the president that was in office when they took their commission. So you're making such a big decision in your life, and the president is, you're taking an oath to the Constitution, not to the president. But it tends to be anybody that was like a JFK commissioned officer is typically a JFK. Anybody in the Reagan years is usually Republican. Anybody in the Clinton years is usually a Democrat. So our graduates are really split right down the middle, which I think is healthy for the country too. And usually, and when you're in the military, you can't be political. It's actually part of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So, we take an oath to the Constitution, not to an individual and not to a party.
Amen, man. That is how it should be. And I'm glad that you gave us that perspective and that reality and that understanding. And there are worse leadership groups for sure than one captained by multiple West Point grads to try and teach people about leadership. I don't know that there's a better place to come from to teach leadership than what you do at West Point. So my man, I appreciate you very much. I hope that whatever we did here today, that it gets seen by enough people out there to give a little bit more perspective. I love the pin that you're wearing on your jacket too. I think it's so indicative of the reality that those two countries are married together. To
leave you on a note, so when I first became the special advisor to General Zaluzhny, one of the first things I did was to invite the United States to return in force. And so I drafted a letter and I gave it to the general staff. And I made a bet. I said, if you get General Zaluzhny to write this letter to General Milley inviting the United States Army, 10th Group Special Forces in particular, to return to Ukraine, I will get a Ukraine-American flag tattoo. And so...
Oh, yes. Every show needs to end with something like that. That's awesome.
That's the Ukrainian flag flying into the war, U.S. supporting it.
And actually,
and the trident up there, that's the national symbol of Ukraine. And the light is coming from the American side, and the darkness on the shaft is coming from the Russian side that they're attacking into. So a lot of symbolism there. So,
well, dude, listen, man, the fact that you have that, I'm not coming to visit you in Ukraine anytime soon, okay? But when this thing finally ends, okay, when this thing finally ends, I'm see if I can drag my wife with me. You'll let me know if it's safe to bring the kids.
Everybody. It's going to be an amazing economic boom. It is going to be like something we haven't seen. It is going to be incredible. So it's a beautiful country, great people with a lot of promise. And I want the whole world to visit Kyiv and Lviv and Odessa as soon as the war is over.
Well, man, when this war is over, we're going to have you back because you'll have a new role at that point as like the director of international tourism for Ukraine. And when we switch you from special advisor to the commander in chief to Ukraine to something having to do with rebuilding that country you now call home, we're definitely going to have you back, my friend, so that we can do that. And will you do me a favor? Would you please give me a heads up when you're next in Miami, man, so we can go grab dinner?
I will. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Pal. Yeah, brother. Always good to see you. And again, can't look at it enough. Thanks, pal. I appreciate it. Okay. Good to see you, man.
Great to see you. Thanks.
Yeah, pal. Take care. How is that? That's pretty cool. For purposes of our first show, I thought we would have the greatest impact of having our first episode with somebody like my friend Dan. And I hope that gave you a little bit of an education, but that's what we're going to do here. And I hope that you'll tune in for our next episode. I can't promise it'll be a guest as cool as the one that I just had, but I'll try to do my best. So thanks for being on the Back Porch with me. Take care.
Thanks for watching the Back Porch podcast. To stay up to date on upcoming podcasts and guests, like and follow us on social media for the latest updates. To keep this podcast part of a greater dynamic dialogue, we encourage your comments, and we'll see you next time on the Back Porch.